Welcome everybody to another edition of ATC Network Presents, and today we've got a very special guest, somebody that I met not that long ago, but he had a great impact on me, and more importantly, the work that he does had a great impact on me, and so I'm really happy to have him in here. It's Todd Krasinsky from Speranza Therapeutics.
Correct.
And it sounds really fancy schmancy, but we're going to break it down. It's not an investment firm or lawyers or anything like that. What is your job with Speranza? What's your role there?
Thank you, Scott. And I'm happy to be here too, by the way. So at Speranza Therapeutics, I am the Chief Strategy Officer and one of the co-founders for Speranza Therapeutics.
Oh, it's one of the co-founders.
Correct.
You know, usually founders, they all kind of like, okay, now that we made it, everybody's got to do a job.
Yeah.
You end up in strategy.
That's right. Absolutely.
Draw the straws, or that's what you wanted?
That's kind of what I wanted.
Okay, good. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's right up my alley. Yeah.
That's a good thing. And, it's great to have you here. And,
thank you.
To talk about this stuff is exciting, and I know people are going to find it exciting. Before we do anything else, you're good, your family's good, COVID, everything's okay?
Yeah, thank God. Well, I've had a couple family members that just recently came down with COVID, but they're doing better, thank God.
Okay. Oh, it's such a tough time right now.
It really is.
One of the things that goes hand in hand with COVID, though, is this uptake in opioid abuse, overdoses, and people needing treatment and needing effective treatment. Overdose rates up 82% in certain places.
Absolutely.
It's bad out there.
Yeah.
We can't just go back to treatment as usual. We got to start looking for new solutions. And that's kind of what you're doing, isn't it? Looking for something new to help people.
Absolutely is. 100%. Look, I think during this pandemic, one of the things that I think the country in general, and especially the media, all the attention has been on COVID. And so, prior to that, it was all about the opioid crisis, the opioid epidemic. So we have an epidemic inside of a pandemic, and the opioid epidemic has grown exponentially because of the pandemic. Last year alone, there were 94,000 overdoses in this country. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely appalling. And so, any way that we can, address this, we're here to do that. And at Speranza Therapeutics, that's one of the things that we've got a medical device that helps treat opioid addiction.
And that's what I want to talk about, because obviously with Addiction Training Center, we're all about trying to find ways to get people the help they need. But once they get the help, let's make sure they're getting something that they really need.
Exactly.
Speranza Therapeutics, you're talking about the ST Genesis product, which to me, I might be wrong. It sounds to me like when you're hearing when you're going to hear what you're hearing, you're going to say, why isn't everybody doing this?
Yeah.
And why would they do anything different than this?
Right.
So I'm going to lay it on you. Give us an outline. What is ST Genesis?
Well, you're 100% right. Why isn't everybody doing it? And so I scratch my head sometimes and ponder that. And there's a couple of reasons for that, honestly. But ST Genesis is it's a medical device. It's known as it's a percutaneous nerve field stimulator device.
A lot of big words there.
Yes. PNFS, percutaneous nerve field stimulator device.
Okay.
To put it in simplistic terms, it is a device. It's a microchip. It's microchip and microcurrent technology that emits very low microcurrents of electricity that innervate certain nerve endings within your auricular part of your ear, right here. So your ear is very rich in nerve bundles. There's a few cranial nerves that are found right inside your ear, believe it or not. And there's a couple really important nerves that we address. One is known as the trigeminal nerve, and the other is the vagus nerve. And the research and the data and the outcome data and all the clinical studies that we've done proves that this has a very meaningful effect on patients that are going through an opioid withdrawal. And so therefore we have an FDA clearance for this device for opioid withdrawal management or opioid detoxification. When those two nerves that I mentioned, when they're innervated with this microcurrent, typically it's between 2 and 4 hertz. But there's a duty cycle with this that swings back and forth between 1 and 10. But when it does its magic, it sends these electrical impulses directly to the brain through that trigeminal nerve. And the thought is that there's a large endorphin release. And what happens with opioid withdrawal, and think of the opioid receptors in your brain as a Y. Receptors are a Y. And drugs and medications the molecules are round or spherical, and they attach to these. So when you take that drug away, you have this receptor that's raw, empty, and
wide
wanting
open
to be occupied.
Yeah,
wants to be occupied, and that's what causes the withdrawal symptoms, and that's what causes the sickness. The thought is what happens is these endorphins are released inside the brain, and these endorphins attach to the opioid receptors. So we see patients with this unbelievable, withdrawal syndrome with a clinical opioid withdrawal scale, very high sometimes. We've seen patients with very high numbers. When we attach this device, we can get them down to a level where they can barely even tell that they're going through withdrawal within minutes. Within just 5 to 10 minutes, they see a very significant change. Within the first hour, from our last clinical trial that we just did, we were able to prove that we had a reduction of 93% of the clinical opioid withdrawal syndrome. 93%, which, yeah.
So this would be like things like anxiety, things like physical pain?
Physical pain, withdrawal, yes. All the signs and symptoms of withdrawal.
Wow.
Goosebump flesh, anxiety, fear, heart rate.
Todd, let me take it backwards for a second. Sure. Because you hit a lot of things when you're talking about the receptors and the nerves and everything. I mean, I guess in the super layman's terms, let's go way back. People who are coming off of opioids, and they are basically a raw nerve. Their nerve endings are wide open. They're hungry for anything. That's the cravings that you're getting. Mm-hmm. They want something. But having a raw nerve, it's almost like having an exposed nerve in your tooth. It's just reactive to everything.
Correct.
So how does stimulating make that better? What exactly is happening? You're saying you're stimulating the nerve endings. And because the only time I think most people have experience in stimulating a nerve ending is when they hit their funny bone.
Right.
And that's not something that they think would be very helpul.
Right.
So How does that work, the mechanics of that?
Yeah, no, and that's a very good question. And so, first of all, I just want to make sure that I'm very crystal clear on the technology and how it actually works, because this is not TENS, because people know about TENS, so that's like electrical stimulation.
Yeah.
This is not acupuncture. It is not electroacupuncture. It falls into a classification known as neuromodulation, which clearly is defined as having biochemical changes within the brain. And so with all the research that has been done, with that microcurrent, it has to be very, very specific, that current. But when it is emitted between that 2 and 4 hertz, as I mentioned, the nerve is stimulated, but those electrical impulses cause the brain to release endorphins.
Right.
So it's kind of like if you think of like the runner's high, when you work out, you feel really good, you get that sense of well-being. Or when it's your body's natural pain medicine are endorphins, right? So when you're injured, usually your endorphins go, are emitted in your brain to help with that pain syndrome. But that's what happens when that nerve is stimulated. And then when the vagus nerve is stimulated, the vagus nerve, it's a very large nerve in your body, and it's part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the checks and balances within your body. So if you think of fight or flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system, fear, anxiety, fighting for your life,
right.
And it's increased anxiety, fear, blood pressure, heart rate, everything is, like when you get scared, when somebody really scares you, that's fight or flight. That's your sympathetic nervous system reacting. And so what happens when someone's going through a detox, there's this electrical firestorm going on inside the amygdala of your brain. And that sympathetic nervous system is on fire. And so what happens when that vagus nerve is stimulated, it tries to bring your brain and your body to its homeostasis level, into that normal state of being. So the vagus nerve is stimulated, it drops your blood pressure, drops your heart rate, lowers the anxiety and the fear. And that's typically the first thing that happens when this device is placed.
So if this is going on, and again, I like what you said at the beginning, this isn't TENS, this isn't the auricular acupuncture, although all of those things were things that obviously led up to this kind of technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those are kind of like the leading, the beginning stages of this. To get to this point is amazing. To get to this point where it can modulate the way it does and do those things. And I love this. We've talked about this off air. I'm going to bring it on air. A lot of people are going into detox. They get sick. They're feeling awful. They're coming out of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
Everything hurts or everything is numb or whatever it might be. It's all over.
Yes.
And the first thing they want to do is grab a pill to make it better.
Exactly.
And this is the part, folks, where I said, why aren't we doing this? Why are we giving people Suboxone? Listen, I think all medication has a purpose.
Absolutely.
But I think we've bastardized it. It's become like the answer to everything, and it shouldn't be.
Sure.
Why aren't more people doing this? Is it just the addict, or is it the system that has become dependent upon these other things?
You really hit the nail on the head. It's very controversial and political, and I have to be careful what I say. I try to be unbiased in this when I'm asked these kind of questions, although I think we all have a certain bias when we're asked this question, that people that are in the field of addiction medicine. But I could tell you, listen, the medications that are out there that are the standard of care right now for opioid detox and withdrawal management, the agonist and the partial agonist medications, they're great. I mean, they've served a purpose, as you said. They all serve a purpose. There's harm reduction, meaning that it has a meaningful impact with reducing overdoses and deaths throughout the country. For the most part, I mean, that's really what they were intended for. However, they are awfully abused, and so if it's taken properly and used properly, yes, it has a place. But there's a lot of abuse that happens with those. And unfortunately, some patients end up staying on these medications for a long, extended period of time. And then when it's time for them to come off of the detox medication, they have to detox from the detox medication. So that becomes a problem. That's a big problem because they have long half-lives, and the detox is much longer than the original drug they were addicted to. Yes, there's harm reduction, but they're going to have to pay the piper at some point. They're going to end up, being sick again. And so, to answer your question, this device works immediately. There's immediate impact with reducing that sickness.
We say immediately. We're talking about minutes.
Minutes. Within 5 minutes, a patient will start to feel better. Within 60 minutes, within the first hour, patients have seen up to a 93% reduction in their illness symptoms. 93%. That was a trial that we just did with Yale University, their behavioral health PhD researcher and research team in partnership with Aware Recovery Care. We did a case series study, and we were able to prove that outcome data. And so 100% of the patients that went on this treatment went on to longer term treatment as well, which is huge. One of the big problems that you were mentioning about detox and patients getting sick and needing treatment right away, part of the issue is that it sometimes can take 72 hours to get the standard of care medications on board, like the Suboxone. It's called an induction. Yeah. And if they give it too soon, the patient gets really sick, and they can obtain this phenomenon known as precipitated withdrawal, which makes it even worse. So clinicians have to wait, a while. And so these patients are hurting badly for the first few days before they can even start this. Because of that issue, many patients end up leaving. They can't stand the pain of detox. They leave treatment against medical advice. They call it AMA. AMA. Yeah. The national average for AMA right now is at 24%. 24% of patients leave detox because they just cannot tolerate the withdrawal symptoms, and they go back out and they do the same thing over. The recidivism rates, the reoccurring ER visits, ICU visits, it has an extraordinarily huge burden on our healthcare system. And so that's one of the huge benefits of our device, honestly, is that we could treat them right away. We get them comfortable, and we were able, there is a treatment center known as White Deer Run in Allenwood, Pennsylvania, that looked at using our technology versus the standard of care that they use, which is the buprenorphine or methadone detox, because they were having a fairly significant AMA rate, which was higher than the national average. They were able to prove that they reduced their AMA rates by 50% with this device.
Wow.
And so that's huge. 50% of those patients would have walked out the door.
That could be 10 out of 100 people who you don't lose, who aren't put at, possibly to die out there, in relapse.
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
I'm going to put it out there, and I know, like I said, this is a touchy thing for you, and you have to be careful. There is a place for the methadone. There's a place for Suboxone.
Of course.
These kind of things were meant to use as a titration to bring people down from addiction when they are medically compromised. The problem is that we're talking about 5-7% of the addicts who come through who have that kind of medical they're medically compromised where coming down too fast would be harmful. Mm-hmm. But they're still giving it to 70 or 80% of the clients. Mm-hmm. That's where we're talking about, right? I mean, that's a fair statement.
It is a fair statement. To answer your question also, why isn't everybody using this?
Yes.
Right? Why? Because you asked that question, and I didn't think I really.
I'm going to tell you why it makes sense to me, because if you put them on it,
yeah.
If I got to wait 5 or 6 days or 3 days for them to get their medication, get adjusted to their medication, do that, and if I can have somebody come through the door and within the first hour of them being in my facility, I could have them feeling better, more focused, and involved in their treatment.
100%.
Why wouldn't everybody do that?
Anytime we look at a medication, any kind of treatment in healthcare, there's two very distinct classifications that are used to evaluate whether or not a treatment provider wants to use this. Number one, clinical efficacy. Does it work? Right? We could check that box because it works extremely well. There's nothing on this planet that can work better than this, and nothing on this planet can get somebody, reduce their withdrawal symptoms as quick as this can. Number one.
And so you've got no problem. It's Speranza Therapeutics. If somebody says clinical efficacy, you say bring it on.
100%.
Let's talk. Let me show you the data.
100%. We have data to support that.
Beautiful.
That statement. So it's clinical efficacy and reimbursement.
Oh,
that's where the rub is. Reimbursement, yes. So it has to do with the reimbursement of this device. Insurance companies have not recognized this as a treatment modality that's a covered benefit under their insurance plans, whether it's through their medical benefit, behavioral health benefit, or pharmacy benefit. Most medical plans think of this as being experimental still. However, we are getting very close. We do have we are working with a couple of commercial payers right now, insurance companies, one of which I can't announce the name yet. I don't have legal.
Of course not.
But
of course
I don't have the legal approval to do so, but it's a very large insurance company that decided there's strong evidence here that this works, and they want to pilot this. So we have 3 sites out in the Midwest, or actually out west in the state of Nevada, that we're going to be piloting this in cooperation with this insurance company.
And allow them to do their studies and see how that.
Correct. They want to evaluate it and see it. And once that happens, I think it's going to get more widely accepted, and it's going to be reimbursed through insurance.
And people shouldn't freak out, because Todd, this is standard. When there's something new that comes along,
and it's not very expensive.
It could work, and everyone in the world can know it works from day one.
Yeah.
You could still talk sometimes decades before it's fully accepted. So you're actually probably ahead of the curve right now.
And because of the epidemic, and because it's such a political sensitive issue, and because, look, there's people dying every day, every minute somebody, I don't know how many people just overdosed since we started this podcast, but it's definitely, at least a handful. And so it's definitely something that I think everyone's taken very seriously and taking a look at it. And so we are on a fast track. And so even with Medicare and CMS, we have applied for a reimbursement code for this device.
Excellent.
So we're just waiting. It's just a waiting game. But in the meantime, we are still, and there's a lot of patients that are willing to pay cash. It's only $600 for the device for the whole length of their treatment. So, it's not extremely expensive. It gets them comfortable, and it can get patients, clean and get them engaged in treatment, as you said, and get them to the next level of care, whatever that may be. And so, people are really starting to recognize that. But in lieu of that reimbursement piece, if we're able to reduce those AMA rates,
exactly where I was going to go.
These treatment centers, when they lose a patient, they lose dollars, right? That's lost revenue for them. So they are encouraged and incentivized to keep patients, engaged in treatment for as long as they can, because it's the longer a patient stays in treatment, statistically, the better chance of them of staying clean and sober, right? They have a better chance of finding recovery. And so, so if we can reduce that AMA rate and get patients really engaged, they're going to pick up the revenue on keeping that patient rather than walking out the door, right? And so,
if you're cutting AMAs in half, even if you're cutting them down to a third, even that, but you're doing a half because people are satisfied. Clients don't walk out the door.
They save one
when
patient.
They're happy. They don't walk out the door.
They save one patient from walking out the door. They could buy 50 of these devices. I mean, it's that profound.
I was just going to say it covers the cost plus.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's abstinence based. It's innovative. It's technology. There's no medications that are required. Although sometimes if they have some breakthrough withdrawal symptom, they can have what they consider comfort meds, but it's not the opioid replacements that we were just referring to. So at the end of the day, it's a fantastic offering that treatment providers can offer their patients. And then lastly, with that AMA, we feel so strongly, Scott, that we will reduce AMA rates, that we put our money where our mouth is. If a treatment provider decides to do this and starts using our devices, and they put this on a patient and they leave AMA, they don't have to pay for the device. The device is free. And to this date, we have not had somebody walk out of treatment while using our device. We haven't had to give any away for free.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, it's only a matter of time. This is going to catch on. And I think at some point, we're going to see a huge paradigm shift, and this is going to end up being the standard of care.
Now, again, this doesn't replace everything. Right. Because there are some people that are medically at risk where this would not be an appropriate treatment. But you guys are very careful about that. When you're putting things in place, you're not saying, hey, this is the miracle for everyone.
Oh, gosh, no.
I mean, you guys are very clear about that, right?
100%.
And you train. What kind of training goes along with these devices? Because it's not just a matter of just putting them on. It's monitoring. It's about paying attention to things, making sure that it's working properly.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a full training program. We take that. That's part of what we do is a lot of clinical, both either remote, if they want remote training, or in person. I personally like to do the in-person training because we can actually be there while they're putting a device on their first patient. It's quite extraordinary when you see somebody, with goosebumps and, in tears, keeled over in pain and stomach cramps, and you put this device on. Within just a few minutes, they're sitting up with a smile on their face. It's absolutely amazing. But we do train them how to properly put the device on, proper patient selection, because it's clearly not for every single patient. And we would never say it's for everybody. So it's got to be, it has to be the appropriate patient. But we also do follow up assessments afterwards to make sure that that the device is working correctly. There are some strategies, some little tips that we can provide to the provider. that will ensure that they have success with the device. But we stand by the product 100%.
And this isn't just something anybody can order, because this is a serious medical device.
Correct. Yeah.
So it has to go through the FDA and everything else. And so it's got to be ordered by a facility with medical doctor and everything else, right?
It has to be a prescription. Correct.
Okay.
A physician has to order. Anybody that has ordering privileges, I guess it could be, a nurse practitioner, PA, anybody that can prescribe. But yeah, it has to be ordered through a medical license.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, if you want to know more, you can go to SperanzaTherapeutics.com. And, what are we looking at for what kind of length of time would somebody wear a device like this? Well, first, before I ask you that, I'm going to give you a two-parter. First of all, what's it like to wear something like that? Is it cumbersome? Is it intrusive for the client? Does he feel like Robbie the robot when he's all hooked up? And how long would they have to wear it?
Sure.
On average?
Yeah. So it's quite comfortable. For the first few minutes, they may feel a little bit of a stinging. They could feel they could feel the electrical impulses. So some patients complain it has a little a zap or stinging, but not severe. But your body, they become very tolerant. They become tolerant to it, and after 15 or 20 minutes, they're not even really feeling it after that. And aesthetically, it's about the size of a thumb drive. It sits right behind their ear. There's a couple of wires that attach to it with little percutaneous pins that are properly placed and secured with a little bit of tape. It's not something that you're going to want to go to a fashion show with, but it's not. But people are going through a detox are probably not wanting to go to a fashion show. But it's not.
Good point.
But it's not. It's
not cumbersome. It's not
cumbersome at all.
Wires hanging all over the place.
Yeah,
it's just over the ear, like maybe an old Bluetooth device kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of wires that you can see a couple of wires, but it's nothing big.
Yeah,
it stays on for 5 days. It works for 24 hours for 5 days. So, and typically most patients are done with their detox after 5 days. And if they do have any residual, if it's a longer half-life medication that they're on, and they have some recurrent symptoms, they can always use another device afterwards. But most patients, by and large, I would say, 95% of patients only require one device.
How is that? It seems like it's speeding up the recovery as well. I mean, I don't know if that's an accurate statement.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into something like that, but maybe there's something to, if I feel good, my body heals better. Right. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, it could be. I mean, look, we've been told patients have a sense of well-being. They generally feel better. They sleep better. They're feeling well. They're not feeling depressed and yucky. They're feeling pretty good.
Right.
So there could be some of that effect happening that makes them feel better. Could possibly potentiate their recovery. I don't know. But we certainly can't make any claims that it will speed up detox. But the drug is going to get eliminated out of the body regardless, whether you're using a device or not. But it just will 100% make the patient comfortable.
If it's just, I think it's an easy line to draw. Just for laymen, I guess. The easy line to draw is that if I'm physically feeling better, I'm going to adopt a better mental attitude and a better mental attitude moving forward.
Yeah.
And in recovery, attitude is huge. And so
Absolutely.
If I'm suffering, I'm miserable, I don't want to be there, I don't want to do any of this.
Right.
If I'm feeling better, it just gives me that leg up.
Yeah.
So we're talking about detoxes in general. They can give you a call. They can go to the therapeutics, SperanzaTherapeutics.com. They can call you directly and talk to you. That's your cell phone there. It's 860-637-4067. You can call to Todd. It doesn't necessarily have to be a detox. I mean, it could be a treatment center, because sometimes people come into treatment centers and they're still suffering from very strong post-acute withdrawal.
Post-acute withdrawal. Absolutely. And that there's a good place for that too with this device. So any kind of withdrawal symptom or syndrome that occurs, either acute withdrawal syndrome when they're first coming off of the drug that they were taking, or as you mentioned, the post-acute. Sometimes that could be, a couple of weeks afterwards, and they're starting to become symptomatic. You can certainly use the device for that, and it would work quite well. We do see the device used most of the time. It's used I call it on the front end in the very beginning of the detox phase, but sometimes on the back end. Sometimes if and we're not saying that this device is going to replace buprenorphine or methadone. However, it's not necessary to use those medications if you use this and transition them to maybe some other MAT, medication assisted treatment. However, some treatment centers have used it in combination with some of those with buprenorphine or methadone with lower dosing using this device. They've experimented that way and it's worked out quite well. And some treatment programs sometimes will detox people off of methadone to put them on something else like a Suboxone. But they have to their urine's got to be clear for a few days.
Right.
Of any opioid metabolites before you can start them on the next one, because that, again, will put them in precipitated withdrawal. So this could be used as a transition to the next medication.
Right.
Or at the very end, if they are doing a taper, and they slowly or sometimes very quickly taper patients to get them completely off of the buprenorphine, they're going to be sick at the end. When they come off of their buprenorphine, there's no way around it, and so that's where this fits. Also, this device would work wonderfully in that scenario as well. So it works well on the front end and the back end.
Anytime when withdrawal becomes an issue, it really is. It's again, we're not. If they are medically compromised, it always has to go to the doctor and whatever you got to do first. But this is the withdrawal syndrome that we see. That people, this is when people get frustrated. They leave. They can't take it. They're crawling out of their skin.
Right.
Why not do this? You've been doing this for a little while now, and I know there's places that have been using your stuff very successfully.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like? I assume you go visit them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
What's it like to go in there and to see the reactions and see what's going on there? Is it a good feeling for you to walk through those doors?
It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I'm a registered nurse. I became a nurse to save lives, and I started off my career saving lives in the emergency room. Before that, I was a paramedic, and I just felt like I was put on this earth to help people to save lives in any way that I could. I get the same feeling that I used to when I used to save a life in the ER. I remember going home just feeling really good about what I just did, and in this, as you just mentioned, when I walk through the doors of, let's say, Aware Recovery Care, for instance, it is the best feeling in the world when I get phone calls sometimes from some of the field nurses that place these devices. So they actually do these as an outpatient. They place these devices on patients in their home, and they're monitored with home care nurses through Aware. And the first couple, Rosemary from Aware called me in tears. She was in tears of joy.
Wow.
Because she couldn't believe what she just saw and what she witnessed. We saved people's lives. There was somebody that was threatening, possible suicide, overdosing, and it was pretty sticky. And they put our device on someone that was going through a detox, and it saved that person, and they're still clean today.
Amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
Amazing. And, there's so many of us out there that work in the treatment industry. And if your company isn't looking into these kind of things, not looking for new ways of doing things and better ways to help people, shame on them. Shame on you guys. You guys got to try. I'm not saying that everybody has to use your product.
Right.
But you know what? If there's a possibility that it's going to make things better, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be there for the client, right?
100%.
We're supposed to be there to reduce harm, to reduce pain, to give people their lives back. And if there's a possibility we could do it using ST Genesis and working with Speranza,
right?
Try it. Yeah. Speaking of trying it, how does that work? Let's say somebody from ABC Detox says, "Yeah, but I'm not going to go all in if I don't know it works." But you understand that.
I do understand that, and so because of that, we will clinically train them on how it works, patient selection, and the application of the device, and we'll give them 2 free samples to try it on a patient to see for themselves. They're skeptics, and people are skeptic. I was skeptical. Look, I just thought, oh, geez, electrical stimulation, they're going to wave some incense, ring a little bell, and they're going to feel better, right? And so, but
hey, don't knock the bell. I like the little bells. All right,
the bells are cool. They are. I mean, but at the end of the day, it really works. It really, really works. And I think if treatment providers are at least somewhat open-minded, I encourage them to give it a try. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. There's no financial burden, no financial cost. I will personally guarantee we will provide free samples for you to try, and then be your own judge.
But do it. I mean, I know there's people, we send samples out and they sit on a shelf. Don't use it, because this is going to improve your ability to care for your client. It's going to improve their lives. And I'll tell you what, you start using it, it's going to improve your bottom line too. And you've shown that.
Absolutely.
So please give Todd a call or go to SperanzaTherapeutics.com, learn more about it. It's hard to believe with how you're talking about this, that you were a skeptic at first. What was it that changed? I just got to ask last question. What changed your mind about it?
Well, I read the clinical data and the outcome data. And then when I saw a device placed on a patient, I saw with my own eyes, when I physically can see the goosebumps disappear on their skin, when I can see them after 10 minutes, after being so sick in a fetal position, sitting up with a smile on their face, I was a believer.
That's perfect. Whatever we said here, you don't have to believe any of it. But if you make that phone call, get a hold of Todd, let him show you. Absolutely. Let him show you so they can have the experience you had. And, once people start using this, do they quit?
No, once they start using it, they love it. I mean, that's just, at the end of the day, it's an effective means of opioid withdrawal management. And once they start using it, there's no downside to it.
I'm going to tell you something else too, because once the approvals start coming through and once insurance companies start picking up on this stuff, which is coming,
it is.
You could be behind the 8 ball. You could be standing in line and not getting the units. Why don't you be first? Why don't you be forethinking? Why don't you start being the guys who are paving the way and try this?
And that's a good point, Scott, because we do get quite a bit of a fair amount of patient internet traffic, and we do get inquiries. And patients will say, "Listen, I have a loved one," or family members, or even patients themselves will call up and say, "Hey, I have a loved one that's going through a detox. I want to try your device. Do you have a treatment provider in Minnesota?" We have to look and scramble. And if we don't have somebody that's trained and willing to use this device, unfortunately, we have to try to get that patient into a treatment center, close to their home, at least to try to get them some help. But at the end of the day, if a treatment provider is willing to at least try this and at least get, and all the training, everything is free. There's no charge for that. If they're certified as a certified, treatment facility with our device, we can certainly start sending patients their way. And I think of this as a true partnership, because we're all in this together.
Absolutely. I'm hoping I'll have Todd come back one time. Maybe we could bring in a device and do a little demonstration for people out there. And then
would love that.
And then families, learn more about this, and you can start asking for it. And if you don't know who has it, they can call Speranza. They can get a hold of. They can go to your website and they'll find out where it is.
Yeah, you can go to www.SperanzaTherapeutics.com, or they can call me directly, and I can certainly give them direction.
Beautiful. Todd, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. We'll catch you here again, right?
Absolutely, we will.
All right,
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right. So that's our special guest, Todd Krasinsky with Speranza Therapeutics. We're talking about ST Genesis. And please, I encourage you one more time. Go to SperanzaTherapeutics.com, or you can call Todd directly at 860-637-4067. For now, I'm Scott Jones, thanking you for joining me. Make sure that you like this program. Share it with your friends. We'll catch you next time right here on a special edition podcast from ATC Network.
Thank you.